Chapter 1912, A Place of Chaos. The area of the island had become an absolute restricted area. Commander Sane used the power of the pyramid to form a special independent space, and at this time he was fighting Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin in it, and no outsider could enter at all. However, the scene was just as thrilling outside. The commotion here caused the entire Jingu army to shake. The troops stationed nearby sent requests to the higher-ups one after the other, asking if they should send troops. However, throughout Prison City, the signals had been blocked in advance by Yang Xinxin, and they were unable to get any news. This was for their own good, because with the strength of these ordinary soldiers and low-level mutants, entering the battlefield would only result in them becoming cannon fodder. After the Great Mutation era, what truly determined the outcome of battles was always the top mutants and super weapons. The era of cold weapons and low-end firearms was long gone, and the number of people could no longer determine the outcome of battles. At this time, in a corner of Prison City, a silver thunder suddenly landed, bombing out a large flat area. Commander Sane's captain of the guards and minister of supervision, Choi J, descended here. Behind his black-framed glasses were a pair of murderous eyes. A short distance away, his opponent slowly walked over. Liang Yu was tall and slender, full of feminine fitness rather than femininity, like a strong and agile female leopard. In her hands, she carried the long sword Dragon's Roar, and she was dressed in golden battle armor, which was colored according to her surroundings by the chameleon system, making her difficult to distinguish against the backdrop of the golden light. "You guys, just who the hell are you? Do you know the serious consequences of invading the KG Kingdom and attempting to assassinate Commander Ken Sane?" Choi J snapped. Liang Yu thought of Zhang Yi's words and said indifferently, "We only want to kill Ken Sane. Overthrowing such an evil dictator is a great thing for the entire KG Kingdom, isn't it? You don't have to do anything, we'll take care of this dictator for you. Maybe." She paused, trying to convince the man in front of her, "You could join us." Choi J's mouth slowly curled up. "Nonsense. You despicable invaders, do you think you are righteous? I can tell you for certain that your decision to intervene in the affairs of another country is the most absurd thing of all. Don't use high-sounding excuses to cover up your despicable heart," he said, slowly removing his glasses. At this moment, his face looked like that of a ferocious beast. Liang Yu knew that her persuasion had failed. She really was not a good speaker. However, she remembered a sentence Zhang Yi had told her before. Most people don't have their own opinions. They are used to blindly following, and they listen to whoever has higher authority, a louder voice, or a stronger attitude. But when that person's voice is suppressed and a voice higher than theirs appears, people will not hesitate to bring them down and step on them 10,000 times, never to let them rise again. It was pointless to persuade Choi J. These people will only truly submit when they prove that they can defeat Ken Sane. Then let's fight. Liang Yu slowly raised the long sword in her hand. At her feet, a golden burst of energy began to spin in a spiral, belonging to the Grandmaster of Martial Arts, which had surged forth from her sea of snow chi and the acupuncture points all over her body. The only Grandmaster-level successor to ancient martial arts in the world, a supreme master who has mastered internal strength. Choi J said coldly, "I'll kill you first, and then I'll go kill all the invaders. You have to understand that the KG Kingdom is not a place where you guys can come and go as you please." As soon as he finished speaking, the black-framed glasses in his hand were hurled towards Liang Yu. A powerful electric current surrounded the glasses, and their power was comparable to a heavy cruise missile. Liang Yu's Dragon's Roar long sword in her hand reversed, slashing diagonally with one stroke. She was about to parry off the attack. But in the instant the long sword was swung, she suddenly felt that the sword in her hand was not listening to her. A powerful force was acting on her sword, causing it to about to come out of her hand. This momentary delay in her actions directly allowed the glasses, wrapped in a powerful electric current, to come in front of Liang Yu. She didn't have time to hesitate, and quickly formed a wall of air in front of her with her left hand. Boom! The moment the black-framed glasses hit the air wall, a huge and gorgeous lightning flower bloomed on the air wall, with such power that Liang Yu had to choose to fly backwards to release the force. She managed to stand firm and look sideways at the sword in her hand. Dragon's roar was silent at this moment, as if nothing had happened. But just now, it was out of her control at a critical moment. That guy's ability can control the weapon in my hands? Liang Yu's gaze became solemn. Zhang Yi was right, this was not the time for children's play, but a life and death struggle. If you think the other person is the victim and are unwilling to fight, then it is likely that you will be the one who dies. Choi J didn't give her time to think, because as she fell, he had already set up the starting position for an attack, and his body turned into lightning as he charged towards her. The lightning attribute ability user is incredibly fast, and even Liang Yu, who has enhanced her senses, feels that her eyes can't keep up with his movements. However, when Choi J's figure enters her heavenly domain, not a single one of his movements can escape Liang Yu's sixth senses. Choi J clenched his right hand into a fist, and a thundercloud storm condensed above it. He aimed the fist at Liang Yu and slammed it down hard. Liang Yu clenched her hands around Dragon's roar and in an instant slashed out with her sword. Even though she was still over 300 meters away, the moment she struck, a fierce burst of energy reached Choi J's face. A chilling murderous intent instantly wrapped around Choi J, and in a panic, he punched in the direction of the energy's attack. There was only a ding sound, like the sound of metal clashing, and he was sent flying. In their first encounter, neither party had gained any advantage, and they both understood that the other was not someone to be trifled with. Choi J wiped his nose with the back of his hand. The speed of the sword was fast, and the attack was completed at a speed that I did not notice. In other words, there is a certain range around her body that cannot be invaded. Then, let's disarm her first. After a brief test, Choi J didn't bother pretending anymore. The opponent's strength made him realize that he could not afford to let his guard down. His hands spread out to the sides of his body, lightning condensing above his body, making him seem like a humanoid form of lightning. His hands suddenly exerted force, and Liang Yu, who was still waiting in the distance with her sword drawn, suddenly felt her body begin to become uncontrollable. The sword in her hand shook violently, and even her battle armor creaked. Warning, warning! Under the influence of a strong electromagnetic force, weapons are difficult to operate normally. At this moment, Liang Yu finally understood what the opponent's ability was. Choi J, mythical ability code Lishi, the god of thunder and plague in the Kermit mythology. Ability Electromagnetic Storm. In addition to possessing powerful electric attack abilities, he can also use electromagnetic force to affect the operation of electronic components and metal weapons. His ability is not strong enough to directly control Liang Yu's weapons and armor, but it can make them unable to function normally. This ability alone is already terrifying enough. There is nothing wrong with the KG kingdom being poor and backward, but the birth of a mutant does not have a necessary correlation with the strength of a civilization. In fact, due to the KG kingdom's sick pyramid structure, he, who is valued by Ken Sane, has access to more resources than an average country with a mutant of the Epsilon level. Choi J folded his hands together, then crossed his fingers, made a fist, and aimed at Liang Yu like a hand cannon. Boom! A furious thunder roared from his body, and streams of electricity gathered towards his fists. He formed a hyper-electromagnetic cannon with his own body. Enhancement ability user, do you have the courage to continue fighting after losing your weapon? Choi J's thumbs on both hands snapped, and a huge lightning orb shot out from between his fists, heading straight for Liang Yu. The distance between the two was less than a kilometer, so this attack arrived in an instant. Liang Yu's exoskeleton mecha was no longer functioning normally at this time. Although the system indicated that it had not been affected by the electromagnetic storm and was not scrapped, there was a risk of it crashing at any time. At that moment, this top-level exoskeleton mecha built by Liu Karen would become the grave that sealed Liang Yu's fate. In an instant, Liang Yu made her choice. She threw away the long sword in her hand and also deactivated the full coverage mode of the exoskeleton mecha, wearing only a black combat uniform as she broke free from the mecha. The moment she appeared, a huge ball of lightning had already crushed down upon her. In the city before her, the scene before her eyes was destroyed by it. The thunder was so loud that it seemed like it was going to destroy the entire city. Liang Yu straightened her posture, gathered her strength in an extremely graceful stance, and then fiercely blasted forward. Boom! Black chi exploded from her fist, and the chi transformed into a long dragon, crashing into the ball of lightning. Large areas of the city were reduced to rubble, the ground shattered, the surrounding area shook, a large number of buildings began to collapse, and the sounds of people screaming in terror could be heard everywhere. Choi J didn't care about any of that, he just wanted to finish Liang Yu as quickly as possible. Weapons are just an extension of the body. Without weapons, I am still powerful. Liang Yu's legs were firmly planted on the ground, and she pushed her right elbow forward, in a standard starting position for Baji Quan. It had been a long time since she had engaged in hand-to-hand combat like this, let alone with her fists and feet. And her most powerful style of boxing was this Baji Quan. For more than 20 years, countless days and nights of practice with her fists never leaving her hands had long ago imprinted these killing techniques into her very bones. Choi J looked her up and down, and his hand summoned a massive thunderstorm. Rumble! Behind him, amidst the shattered city, a storm whipped up a large amount of metal debris, which flew towards him. Among the ruins of the city, cars, steel bars, and bridges were all swirling around him. The electromagnetic storm grew more and more ferocious, and the huge storm had already turned into an earth-shattering tornado around Choi J, mixed with sediment and silver thunder. Rumble! The storm, which had already covered an area of more than 10 kilometers, rapidly approached Liang Yu, intent on wrapping her up in the storm and then rolling her up like confetti thrown into a washing machine. Choi J knew that Liang Yu was an expert in close combat, but with an attack like this, there would be no way for her to get close to her opponent, and she would be unable to make use of her skills. There was no way to avoid the huge storm, which would continue to chase Liang Yu. Of course, Liang Yu had no intention of dodging either. Facing the storm, which flashed with silver lightning, her feet were planted firmly on the ground like pegs, her posture calm and collected, as she drew back her arms like a long bow. Then, in an instant, a punch blasted out like a bullet. Boom! The astonishing loud noise came a moment after the punch was thrown, and the punch had reached several times the speed of Mach. After this punch was thrown, black energy, like a spear, shot out of the fist and impacted fiercely on the storm with an unrivaled momentum. There was a fierce collision between the energy and the electromagnetic storm, and the sound of the fragments of the city being crushed and colliding could be heard, making them even more broken. The long spear of energy advanced inch by inch, while being crushed inch by the electromagnetic storm. Liang Yu followed closely behind, like a cheetah, and charged into the storm on her own initiative. The long spear of energy opened the way for her, relieving her of the strangling power of the electromagnetic storm. By the time the rotating hurricane crushed the long spear of energy, she had already reached the center of the storm, less than 500 meters from Choi J. Choi J's eyes were wide. Is this woman crazy? He never imagined that the other party would choose to use their flesh and blood to directly withstand his electromagnetic storm. This exceeded his imagination of humans. If it wasn't for the mutants who had cultivated their bodies to the extreme, how would they dare to do such a crazy thing? Any moment of inattention would result in being sucked into the electromagnetic storm, and without the support of the earth, no matter how powerful one was, one would be torn apart by the storm. But this woman, she didn't hesitate for a second and just barged in. The safest area in the storm is the eye of the storm. Choi J saw a pair of white hands reach out from the storm, into the eye of the storm where he was, and then tear through the storm as if ripping open a barrier between dimensions, slowly walking towards him. Liang Yu's hands were very pretty, not at all like the hands of a master of external martial arts. Usually, the hands of external martial arts experts are covered in calluses and their fists are much larger than average. Because she cultivates both internal and external skills, she has used medicinal wine to aid her training since she was young, and her hands are as white as jade, although her palms have a thin layer of calluses from years of holding weapons. She stepped into the eye of the storm and looked at Choi J as usual. Choi J subconsciously took a half step back. At this moment, as he looked at Liang Yu, he felt that there was not a person in front of him, but a void. At this moment, Liang Yu entered a state of oneness with the heavens, her mind fearless, and her strength able to be exerted to 100%. Therefore, the humanity in her, all the fear, trepidation, and unease, also disappeared. At this moment, she was a pure fighting machine. Without any nonsense, Liang Yu stabilized her own breath before instantly charging towards Choi J. A black afterimage formed a chain in midair. Choi J's shock only lasted an instant, and soon he came to his senses. Thunder surged from within his body, reflecting his body to a near-transparent color. Ow! When the storm had already begun, even its originator could not stop it. At this time, the storm became the Colosseum for the two, and whoever dared to turn around and leave would inevitably have to withstand the other person's attack from behind. Therefore, Choi J planned to directly engage Liang Yu in a close-quarter fight. Thunder turned into a huge sphere that enveloped his body, while Liang Yu was surrounded by a layer of black energy that looked like it was shrouded in smoke. The martial arts stun ability, Cloud and Smoke Cover, formed a personal defensive armor made of energy that gushed out from her body's acupuncture points from the inside out. She had to use this energy as a barrier to block the opponent's thunder and prevent her internal organs from being burned to a crisp. Choi J's thunder has the ability to restrain enhancement-type mutants. Because of the close contact, it is inevitable that electricity will be conducted. So this time, Choi J took the initiative to attack and charge towards Liang Yu. Liang Yu's face did not show any expression, and she still maintained her starting stance, which was neutral and peaceful. Facing Choi J's attack, she only struck at the moment the opponent got close. Her punch arrived after the initial strike, passing through Choi J's fist that was wrapped in thunder and smashed at her head, and directly hitting his chest. The fist wrapped in thunder grazed past her head, but she simply let it go and walked forward. Choi J's fist missed, but not hers. The two passed each other, their footsteps slowing as Choi J had already arrived hundreds of meters away. He slowly stopped moving, and when he looked down at his body, there was no damage to the clothes on his chest, but suddenly large patches of blood poured out, staining his clothes black. His hand trembled as he touched the blood on his chest, and he turned back and asked, "What technique did you use?" Liang Yu turned around and said indifferently, "Kung Fu. The person you lost to is the martial arts master of the Huashu Kingdom, so there is no shame." Choi J's face revealed a miserable smile. The next moment, he vomited a mouthful of blood, and then his body exploded like rags, directly from the chest area. If he had known who the other person was, he would never have chosen such a stupid method as close combat. No one can win over Liang Yu in the field of close combat in terms of skill. This is what the martial arts masters call not fighting but just a split second, with victory or death depending on the slightest difference. His fist was half a centimeter off, but that half a centimeter made all the difference. Liang Yu sighed as she looked at his corpse. She didn't want to kill, but in this kind of life and death close combat, unless the difference in strength was too great, there was no way to hold back. She walked over and absorbed Choi J's still unfading origin into her own body. Then she sent a message to the others on the communication channel. "The battle on my side is over." Another area of Prison City. Uncle Yu looked very familiar at the moment. He was covered in pitch-black armor, with the only transparent parts being the areas where his eyes should be. Those were the weapons of the demon god's modified body. But unlike Zhang Yi had only put on an exoskeleton suit, while Uncle Yu had directly attached the limbs of a miniature demon god body to his own. He kept his own brain and torso, and had his skeleton transformed into e-metal, with the arms and legs implanted with components from the demon god body. At this time, he looked just like the demon god Yi Plato's, half mech and half human. Of course, for the sake of his lifelong happiness, there were certain parts that he would never replace with machinery, even though doing so might make him even more valiant. The pleasure would be seriously reduced. He stood like a demon god amidst the ruins of the city, his right hand holding a black hammer, his gaze cold and scanning all directions. A raging fire had broken out in the streets, and once the battle had begun, the entire city had become chaotic. The residents of the outer city took advantage of the situation to enter the city and start looting the resources of the central and inner cities. Perhaps the people of the Tianlong in the inner city never imagined that the first attack they would suffer would not come from the invaders like Zhang Yi, but from their own countrymen. The people of the outer city looted the people of the central city, who then went mad and broke into the inner city with the outer city people. They were looting for food. Charging into their magnificent homes, they saw that they could even enjoy air conditioning and even heating, and their eyes suddenly turned red, and then they began to kill mercilessly. Didn't we agree that we were all fellow citizens? Didn't we agree that we were all living a hard life? Why is it that we can't even get enough to eat, and the first thing we do when we wake up every day is check to see if our family members have frozen to death, while you can enjoy such a luxurious life? Kill, kill, kill. You deserve to die, you're all liars. All that talk about sharing the same joys and sorrows was a lie. You only exploit and oppress us, you all deserve to die. The people in the outer city never knew the truth. Just like people in other cities, they had to worry about how to dispose of their feces every day, and they also had to worry about whether Commander Sane could eat enough with only 1 grain of rice a day. But when the truth is revealed, all emotions will turn into the most horrible hatred. They had long since had nothing to live for, and at this time, they fought to the death, smashing and looting, food, houses, and even women. They wanted to take everything. Police officers and armed forces in the city were maintaining order. The scene was too chaotic, and they did not hesitate to open fire. Uncle Yu stood on the edge of Prison City. Behind him was Lake Vilga, the battlefield of Zhang Yi and Yang Xinqin. But he didn't expect that at this time, these people had already forgotten about them and were caught up in internal chaos. The streets were full of malnourished, crazed people from the outer city. They stuffed food into their mouths, while some with bloodshot eyes dragged the richly dressed women of the inner city into the ruins. Why should our wives and daughters have to trade their bodies for food and be called prostitutes, while you can enjoy everything so arrogantly? All of you must atone for your sins.